Well, Dr. Frank Mitloehner, welcome to Bacon Buddies and welcome to North Carolina. It's great to have you here today.
It's my pleasure to be here.
Yeah, Marlo and I are super stoked that you're here. We're looking forward to having a discussion with you.
Great.
Yep. So, Dr. Mitloehner, you are an extension specialist in California, but according to your Twitter handle, you are the GHG Guru. I'm assuming that's greenhouse gas, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so tell me, how did an extension agent become the greenhouse gas guru? Tell me about that journey.
So I have a split appointment at the university. I do teaching and research as a professor, and I'm also an extension specialist. And that means I extend information from the university into the rest of the world.
Mm-hmm.
And being an air quality specialist means that I'm specialized in gases and particles that emanate from animal agriculture. And among those gases are greenhouse gases.
Mm-hmm.
And so I study the type of emissions coming off the pork and the dairy and the beef and other sectors, and ways to reducing those. And so my first interaction with this overall topic was back in 2006, when the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, put out a report called Livestock's Long Shadow. Many of your listeners will know that. That Livestock's Long Shadow report said that the livestock sector produces more greenhouse gases than the global transportation sector. Now let that sink in. Livestock produces more greenhouse gases leading to climate change than the global transportation sector. I took it upon me to analyze that report, and I found that there were serious flaws in it. Namely, that they used different methodologies to assess the impact of livestock versus the impacts of transportation on climate.
Mm-hmm.
I rebutted it publicly, and they agreed with me.
Wow.
And that's how I became the GHG Guru.
The GHG Guru. So that's how it all came about, huh?
Be careful what you ask for.
Wow.
Well, I think one of the biggest trends that we've heard in the last few years is that people should give up meat to save the planet. Can we eat our way out of climate change? What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I wish it were that simple. It's not that simple. Okay, the main human contribution to a changing climate is through the use of fossil fuels, and that's the use of oil, coal, and gas.
Yes.
Which are responsible for about 80%, that's 80% of greenhouse gases stemming from human activity. In the United States, the EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, estimates that all of animal agriculture combined,
Mm-hmm.
so pigs and chicken and beef and dairy and everything combined, is responsible for 4% of our greenhouse gases. Okay? So if we were to stop eating all animal source foods today in the United States, then that doesn't mean we would reduce greenhouse gases by 4%, because we would have to replace them with plant-based foods. And so we would reduce approximately 2.6% of all greenhouse gases.
From 4% to 2.6.
Right. So if we were to become vegan as a society, we would reduce the carbon footprint of the United States by 2.6%. Now, that's not nothing, it's something, but I don't think anybody in their right mind can say this will keep us from a changing climate.
That would not be good. I can't go that way. I respect people's food choices, for sure, but veganism is just not something I'm interested in.
Well, I do the same thing. I really don't care what people eat.
Yeah.
Because to me, that is as much of a personal choice as your religious choices and your partner choices and your voting choices. What we eat is really nobody else's business. But some people make it their business to tell the rest of us what to eat, and I have an absolute beef with that. No pun intended.
Yeah.
I like that pun.
Well, that's great that you said it, because I've heard you say before that food choices are individual choices, and that we need to find ways to work with farmers to produce the food that people want to eat in a sustainable way. So what do you think? And I know you were at the UN FAO recently in Rome, right?
Yes.
And so how did that conversation go regarding how we produce the food we need without depleting our natural resources? Because that was part of that trip, right?
Yes. So first of all, as of today, 98% of all refrigerators in this country contain animal source foods.
98%. Wow.
Wow.
And that means no matter what the very outspoken folks out there, some of which are activists, what they claim, we are not likely to switch as a society to a plant-based diet, but we will always have animal elements in it. And so the question then is, how do we produce that animal source foods with the lowest environmental and other footprints possible? That is the question that I have, and that is what I'm trained to research and talk about. And so how can we do it? The number one way of minimizing the environmental footprint for animal agriculture is by optimizing efficiencies, much like what you do with a vehicle. Look, if you compare the vehicle you drive today with the vehicles your parents drove when they were young, or your grandparents when they were young, we all know the efficiencies, the fuel efficiencies were drastically different. Mm-hmm. Your car today is way more fuel efficient than that of your parents or grandparents. And what does that relate to? That relates to if you burn much less gas to get from A to B, then you're generating much fewer emissions. Mm-hmm. Your environmental footprint is much lower by driving your car than your parents or grandparents. The same is true for our livestock sector today, okay? Our livestock is way more efficient than what it was 50 years or 100 years ago. Way more efficient. Yeah. And that is true for this country, but it's not true for all countries. I spend a lot of time also in the developing part of the world. And there we have very large livestock herds, much larger than ours here, because people have now more disposable income to spend on food. And what they are seeking is nutrient-dense food. The first thing a poor family in Africa or so will add to their diet once they can afford it is an egg or a glass of milk or a piece of meat, because these products are very nutrient dense and they supply them with just those essential nutrients that can help them to fight all different kinds of health issues. Mm-hmm. Now the question is, how shall that food be produced in these countries? Just think about a little statistics here. In the United States, where we have a relatively large dairy sector, for example, we have 9 million dairy cows. 9. In India, they have 300 million dairy cows and buffalo producing dairy. And on average, the cow there versus the cow here produces 20 times less milk.
The cow there, okay, 20 times less milk there. Mm-hmm.
Because their genetic
absolutely
merit, this genetic merit of both the animal and the feed that they eat, as well as the veterinary care, the reproductive efficiencies, all of that is where we were 50, 60, 70 years ago. So they could produce the same amount of milk as they do today, but instead of using 300, they could do it with 30 million. Okay, so the reason why I bring up India or other developing countries is because globally, 80% of all livestock-related issues in the world that are environmental, 80% of those occur in developing countries and are a product of the fact that efficiencies are horrendous. Production efficiencies. Where are they the best? They're the best right here. We know how to do it. The question is, will we maintain the social license to operate the way we know is best? That's the question.
That's a tough
That's a
part.
very important question.
Yeah. Who are those key players in that conversation, in your opinion?
For new technologies, advanced technologies.
Yeah, and deciding, how we're going to produce this food and what food we're going to produce and without depleting our natural resources.
So currently we have a situation where on the production side of agriculture, we are very good. Okay, we are world leading and we are the envy of the world in how we produce food. The problem is that there are activists, many of them are very vocal, who continue the drumbeat of saying that the opposite were true. And what we're
you
doing,
said it right the first time.
Yeah.
yeah. I've done a lot of talking today already.
Sorry.
So, no. They repeatedly say that The way we produce food is the worst.
Mhm.
And they repeat it so often that now parts of the population starts to believe it. And not just the population, but also influences policymakers and so on. And on the other side, you have farmers who say, well, we know that's not true, and we know we're doing a good job, but we are good at producing food. We are not good at talking about it. And unfortunately, animal agriculture has stuck its head in the sand for too long with respect to being at the table and talking about what they do. People now want to know, particularly the 20-year-olds, want to know where their food comes from, and they will ask questions. And if people in agriculture don't step up and answer those questions, don't be surprised that other people will.
Mhm. And that's why we're here.
Yep, that's why we're sitting there here having this podcast.
And I'm glad you do that.
It's just to educate people about where their food comes and being transparent as farmers.
Yes.
To connect with that generation that wants to know where their food comes from. And you're not going to find I'm a generational farmer. You're not going to find my 68-year-old dad talking on podcasts. I mean, he's just not the best communicator. I feel like it's up to millennials and the younger generation to kind of carry that torch to help educate people.
But it's not always a question of being on CNN or
Right.
NPR. Communication starts at the family level.
Mm-hmm.
Or at your community level. You can talk to your community. You go to church, maybe you can talk to your communities, right?
Absolutely.
You can talk to people who ask questions at the level or the circles you are in.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Yeah. And just like having, we have UMO students come out to our farm, just even as simple as a farm tour.
Yeah.
Is just having that conversation.
That actually, do you think, well, this is a question I kind of wanted to ask you is, do you think farmers are slow or quick to adopt these new technologies that you were talking about when it comes to greenhouse emissions? I mean, what's your opinion on that? Of farmers overall with technology?
So in general, farmers are quick adopters to new technologies. But on the greenhouse gas side, we have many farmers who are hesitant because we do have many farmers who say, I see the weather is changing, but I don't believe in climate change. That's some political scheme,
right?
That one party over the other one is pushing on us. And that's actually a problem.
Right.
Because I have news for you. We do have a changing climate. And we do need to address that issue, not just by taking drivers away, but also by adopting to that issue. Because I travel a lot and I see horrendous climatic issues occurring throughout the world and throughout this country. Just back from New Zealand, they were just hit by a cyclone. I've never seen devastation like that before.
Wow.
We have just ended a 5-year drought in California. Many of our farmers thought they would have to stop. And that's the number one farming state in the United States, California, where many farmers thought they had to leave production because of a lack of water. And now our cows are floating in streams of water because it doesn't stop raining. It's just incredible what we are seeing. And I don't need to tell you, you have hurricanes and you have all kinds of disasters here as well. So all of that is related to a changing climate, and our farmers are particularly vulnerable to it. This is not a political scheme. This is something that we need to take by the horns. That means our farmers need to first understand what the issues are. They need to work on minimizing their impact, like other parts of society have to do as well. And then you're part of it, okay? You can be part. Farmers in this country can be part of a climate solution. And that all hinges on one gas. And that gas is methane. It's a unique gas because it has a short lifespan. If you reduce this gas, you reduce warming. That is only possible when you work on methane. It's not true for the other greenhouse gases. And because methane is so important for animal agriculture, that's our main greenhouse gas, we have a main role to play. We can be part of a climate solution. And believe me, this is not some kind of greenwashing or creative accounting. That's real physics and chemistry.
And reducing our methane emissions.
Correct. I've been here in North Carolina for the last 2 days, touring farms that use anaerobic digesters. So they're not reducing methane, they're actually making methane, more methane. But they're trapping it and then they're utilizing it because they have understood methane is energy.
Right.
And nobody just wants to lose energy, but that's what you do if you don't manage that gas.
Yeah.
And it's hard for us as North Carolina pig farmers to actually have access to that advanced technology, because it's like what you say, we have so many agenda pushers against the capture of the methane that it's hard for us to have access to that technology. I mean, we're fighting for what you just said, this great solution that we have. Well, we're fighting to have the right to use it.
Yeah.
From a political standpoint or an activist standpoint.
Yeah.
It's really hard. It's very frustrating, especially as a millennial farmer wanting to advance my farm in that direction. But yet we have to fight our way there because people think the complete opposite of what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, they can think that, but
right.
But when you come from a place,
feelings and facts are two different things.
Right. So as you know, I live in California. Originally, I'm from Germany, but I live in California, and I've been there for the last 20 years. And I know our farming system very well over there. Okay, we have a very, very significant farming sector, and that farming sector was just told to reduce its methane by 40%. 40. That's the largest required mandatory methane reduction in the world, and our farmers have to do this by the year 2030. And at first they thought, "Oh my gosh, what in the world? Do they really want to get rid of us?" To my great pleasure, I learned that the state of California did not want to use what other countries and states did, namely the cane approach of using rules, regulations, fines, taxes to get farmers to do that, to reduce methane. But instead, California decided to use the carrot approach of financially incentivizing reductions of methane, working with farmers and helping them financially to put in technologies to reduce methane. And guess what? It worked.
Yeah.
It worked.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Using the carrot and not the cane. It's not
amazing how that works.
It's amazing how it works. And after 4 or 5 years, after that law passed, we now see that our farmers, our dairy farmers in particular, because that's the largest industry we have on the animal side, have reduced their methane by 30%. Or sorry, I should say they have achieved 30% of their methane goal. Okay, and so that is just mind-blowing. And we now have a gold rush in California. It has nothing to do with gold, but it has to do with taking what used to be a liability, which was methane going into the air, into turning that into an asset, of converting that methane into a fuel type for heavy-duty trucks and buses. So I know that farmers can do amazing things, and they want to be part of a solution,
And as they held that carrot out in front of them, the farmers, I guess they've gotten behind and they've seen the ability of this technology and are behind it now, right?
Yep. Well, 5 years ago, there were maybe 10 functioning digesters in California. Now there are 220.
220.
And in 5 years from now, half of our manure in the state of California will produce biogas that will produce renewable natural gas that will be used as a fuel or to produce power.
Very interesting.
So you've done a lot in the cattle industry with greenhouse gases. How are pigs different from that?
Yeah, pigs are very different. As you know, cattle are ruminants, and they have 4 stomachs. The first one, the rumen, is a stomach the volume of your bathtub at home. And that rumen is constantly filled with microbes, and these microbes, some of these microbes produce methane. Mm-hmm. And that's called enteric methane, because that methane is belched out. It's coming out the front end.
Right.
Many people think it's the back end. No,
right.
It's the front end. Very important distinction. Yeah. Everybody wants to know.
It's not one way. It's the burp.
Right. So that's the main contribution of ruminants to methane.
Right.
Okay? So it's the enteric emissions through the front end of the cow, plus the decomposing manure. Okay, that's on the beef and dairy side. On the pork side, pigs produce way less greenhouse gases than ruminant animals because they are monogastrics like we are. Right. They have one stomach. The front end doesn't matter. They have some flatulence, but that doesn't matter either. What matters is decomposing manure. Right. And that is the main source of greenhouse gases from swine operations. So in the United States, half of 1% of all greenhouse gases stem from the pork sector. Half of 1%.
Yeah.
And about 2 to 3% from the beef sector and the dairy sector. So just to give you an idea. So pork is relatively insignificant when it comes to climate impact.
In North Carolina, we're criticized as having an antiquated, the lagoon and spray field system, for instance, that people say, our critics say that it's antiquated, it's old, but it really works. I mean, it's a cycle where we use the fertilizer from that manure to, fertilize our crops. What do you think about that? And, as you've been on farms this week in North Carolina.
So we have to look at that in a nuanced way, okay? So do anaerobic lagoons work? Yes, they do work because they contain microbes, much as a cow's rumen contains microbes. And these microbes, they digest the nutrients, okay? They break them down.
Yeah.
And after a certain amount of time, the nutrients in that lagoon are then ready to be land applied as fertilizer. But because it's an anaerobic, meaning an oxygen-deprived system, it is also prone to producing methane gas. And actually, it is the waste storage system that produces the most methane. So if you just have an open lagoon, no cover, then the methane that's produced in your lagoon will escape to the air. And to me, that's a waste of energy. We should think about, if I were to build a swine operation, I would not have an open lagoon anymore. It used to be, for decades we have used these open lagoons, but we also have to think about improving over time. And it's not just a digester or nothing. There are other ways of dealing with environmental issues as well. But what I like about digesters is that we can, after using the nutrients that we feed to the pigs, let's say, that go into growing the meat, after those nutrients are excreted in the manure and eventually land applied, we are making a more complete use of the whole thing, because what a digester does is it sucks out the energy that's also contained in the feed. And we don't want to lose energy. Just think about this following analogy. Think about you have a home, and it's in the middle of winter, and your kids open the doors and windows.
My wife would be going crazy.
Why? And
They
why
do.
and why would they go? Why would your wife go crazy? Because it's wasteful, right?
You're letting the bald air out.
That's
Exactly.
right.
Exactly. So you don't
Right.
want to do that. But guess what? Methane is nothing other than energy. And if you just off-gas it into the air,
Letting it out.
then you're letting it out. Then the energy dissipates. It goes away.
Yeah.
And with that, it's not just an environmental issue, but it's also a financial issue. Because you could turn that methane and make it into something profitable. Why wouldn't you?
So that just tells me there's room for improvement here in North Carolina.
There is no doubt. And I want to encourage people to really take that bull by the horns, or that pig by the ears.
Yeah.
We're fighting as hard as we can to have the option to do it.
Yeah.
Well, and you should. I tell you, California is oftentimes laughed at by everybody, particularly farmers, right? As being this extreme state with extreme rules and regulations and so on. But if something like this can happen in California, it can happen everywhere.
Absolutely.
And it should, because what it does, if you, for example, produce this renewable natural gas with digesters, is that you reduce the emissions on the farm, and you also reduce emissions, let's say, in the transportation sector, because now this renewable natural gas can be sold as a fuel to heavy-duty trucks and buses, or it can be made into power to power homes. So it is a double whammy. You reduce emissions on the one side, on the farm, and emissions in the transportation or residential area, and you get paid for it. Now, I want to make very clear, this is not just dishing out some subsidies to our farmers. These are not subsidies. This is a farmer producing a new income stream for a new product they produce. In addition to producing pork, you now also produce power or fuel, and you get paid for it. And that is why it has become a new gold rush in California. Those farmers are not just doing it because they want to be greener, but they also want to stay in the green.
That's right. Make money.
That's what I mean.
That's right, and that's important too. In North Carolina, we've dealt with a lot of advocacy-funded journalism here. I know you spoke a little bit about journalists and the media being one of our adversaries in agriculture. Tell me a little bit. I mean, what's your opinion on the best way to counter some of these attacks that we see?
I think that a lot of this reporting that people in agriculture are opposed to results in the fact that there's a need of information, for information. People, the 20-year-olds who I train at the university, they want to know things around food. They have questions. Is there pus in milk? Is pork production cruel? And so on and so on. They hear all these things on social media. Okay, so now they want answers. And if you as a farmer say no comment, they will not stop asking those questions. And eventually somebody will answer the question. And normally the people answering the questions might be well-meaning, but most often they are ill-informed. And they're activists. And then we get that information onto social media, and journalists pick this up because they are not trained in this field either. Experts don't really want to talk about it. So that is a big problem, okay? We need people with subject matter expertise who are willing to share that expertise in ways that people understand.
Yeah.
And when I say people understand, I include into that journalists. Many of those people I talk to many journalists all the time. And I do so because many of them get questions from their listeners or from their readers, and they can't answer them.
Right.
But they have heard now 10,000 times from some activist group how farming is done, and they think in their heads they know it all. And it's kind of difficult to counter that because, look, I am a subject matter expert in this field. I have worked in this field for 30 years. And I have studied it, I've published it, but what really sets me apart, and also my center, the Clear Center, apart from what most other people do, is that we don't forget who our audience is.
Yeah.
I will never talk down on somebody who I don't agree with, or somebody who is asking me questions that are generally viewed as silly, or I don't think they're silly. They're just questions that come from a place that wants to know. And it is my job to break it down. Sometimes people don't like it.
They don't like the answer, right?
People, I've had a situation last year where a major newspaper wrote a story about me and my center. That was a one-pager titled story, very anti. And why were they very anti? Because I work with agriculture.
Right.
I am an agricultural scientist whose job it is to optimize the environmental performance of animal agriculture. Who else shall I work with if not with agriculture? And there I was criticized for doing that. So believe me, while that sets you back for a while, you think, do I really deserve that? Do I really need that in my life? The answer is, yeah, I really do need that in my life. And if it's not me, it's somebody else. But we do need to work with our farmers. The agricultural sector is not one we can do without. We must have it, just like we must have the health system. And we need to optimize it to our greatest knowledge.
Yeah. It feels like sometimes when a major news article does a hit piece on agriculture, it's just hard to kind of cover up those tracks. They reach so many more people than maybe I can as a farmer or our organization can, NC Farm Families. So it's tough to counter those attacks. It really is, and inform people logistically.
Yeah.
3 years ago, somebody said to me, somebody who I really value, Frank, you have to be on Twitter. I said, what? I have to be on Twitter? What can I do in 280 characters that's meaningful? Boy, was I silly for having waited that long, because now I have 20 million impressions a year on Twitter. I reach so many people. When I write a blog these days, then on day one, I have about 250,000 readers.
Wow.
So that is real impact, okay?
Yeah,
and I have worked to have that impact by building my credibility. And I ask other experts to please do the same. It's upon all of us to do our job, not just to produce the best food we know of, but also be willing to talk about it or write about it or do whatever you need to communicate it.
Absolutely.
I definitely agree.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things that frustrates me is when farmers or different kinds battle each other on production styles. I see that often with grass-fed versus corn-fed, organic versus non-organic. I mean, share with us your thoughts on how we can come together with other farmers on these issues. I think sometimes that's our biggest catalyst.
Yeah, it's a really big problem.
Mm-hmm.
Sustainability in animal agriculture is a pre-competitive issue. We need to raise the bar for everybody. Okay, it's not an issue of this commodity is better than that commodity or raising it this way is better than raising it that way. There is a place for everybody. And everybody can improve and optimize. I don't care what they are. If you're an organic farmer, that doesn't mean everything's perfect, okay? They have a lot of work to do as well.
Yeah, it's a continuous improvement. I talk about that all the time.
So, for example, if you're an organic farmer, you're barred from using pharmaceuticals, so you can no longer treat animals for diseases, for pain and so on, well, then that's obviously an issue around welfare. Conventional farmers of all kinds have issues. Everybody out there can improve. And they should all really pick their own nose and say, well, let me focus on
my problems,
on my opportunities, my challenges, and appreciate that there is diversity in agriculture. And I don't have to put the other one down in order to make myself look good.
I completely agree.
Absolutely.
As a farmer myself, I hate when the agriculture community picks winners and losers.
Yeah,
we got to stand together.
We got to circle the wagon, not shoot in the wagon.
Yeah, but I also want to take a second on this. I think that we need to get away from being defensive.
Mm-hmm.
I actually don't want to circle the wagon. I want agriculture to stop being defensive. I want agriculture to be proactive and active and engaging rather than circling the wagon and fighting the evil enemy.
I think it's always just been a fight. It's hard to,
I know.
It's because you're always attacked, and you're completely right. When I communicate, sometimes I feel myself getting so defensive about, pig farming in North Carolina.
Look, I teach a class at UC Davis.
Can I zoom in on that class if you talk about this?
Oh,
I want to be a listener. I need some tips.
Absolutely. In the animal science department at UC Davis, where I teach, we have 1,500 undergraduate students. We're the largest animal science major in the country. I teach some of those large classes there. And sometimes I ask myself, how do I best communicate the use of technology? Because many of them coming in as a freshman or sophomore are anti-technology use in agriculture, right?
Yes.
They don't like chemical fertilizers. They don't like all kinds of feed additives and so on. So how can I communicate with them to make it understandable as to what we do? So I ask them questions such as, so if you wake up in the morning with a splitting headache because you partied or whatever you did, what do you do? And then I give them several options and they have clickers to answer them. The first answer is they pop a pill, okay, if they wake up with a splitting headache. If you want to prevent pregnancy, what do you do? And there are a couple of different options. Most of them include some kind of technology, okay, and they pick that. Hardly anybody says, I don't do anything.
Right.
Or I pray for nothing happens.
Okay.
Then I asked them, so imagine your father were to suffer a serious heart attack and the only course of action is a pacemaker and defibrillator. Would you appreciate that option? And everybody says yes.
Right.
So when it comes to health applied to their bodies, all of them, 97% of them say yes, 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 and yes. I like technology. I think technology is important for me staying healthy. They have no problem with that. And then you ask the same people about the use of technology in and around food. And the answers are no, 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 and no. And then I asked myself, what went wrong in this picture here? These are things that either promote our health or our nutrition. On the one hand, you are very accepting to technologies. On the other hand, you're not. So what happened there? How did that happen?
I have this conversation with Chad all the time. I feel like agriculture is the only industry where they want us to go back in time.
I tell you this, every morning when I walk my Australian Shepherd through Davis, California, I see big cheese and dairy trucks driving by with happy California cows standing on pasture. In the background is a red barn. And that is how animal agriculture portrays itself.
Yes.
In this 1950s style with the red barn, everybody is on pasture, happy pigs on pasture, happy cows on pasture, happy chickens on pasture. We are depicting agriculture in a way that it hadn't been in decades.
Yeah, it's not old
Why-
MacDonald had a farm.
Right, but why do we do that? I think it's a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
I
Are we
agree.
ashamed? Are we ashamed of how we're producing animal source foods these days? Because if we are not, why don't we depict it the way it is?
Yeah.
I have a problem with that.
I
think
agree
it's-
with you.
I think it's a problem because now we have it in the heads of people that if that animal is not pasture raised, it's bad.
You're absolutely right.
Now, I teach these 500 kids in this class, right? I told you.
I want to sit on this class.
Oh, you can. You can do it in the fall of this
I
year.
want to sit on the class.
I teach them animal science, domestic livestock production, various species, and I ask them, oftentimes I ask them questions. I just lost my thought.
You're fine.
I
It's
just
because
lost
I
my-
bombarded
Where-
you asking
where did-
if I
where
could
did we
sit in
come
your
from?
class.
did-
We were talking about just the
Portraying the farm as
portraying the
as
farm.
the barn, the red barn, and the
right,
guy with a
right,
pitchfork.
right.
And you ask them this question when they're in their class.
So the students overall are very accepting of technology in their daily life. You know, this thing here,
Oh
everybody
yeah,
has one.
everybody
of those.
has one. Everybody's sitting
and
there
everybody
checking their
loves it.
phone.
Everybody loves technology in various aspects of their lives. When it comes to food, they think, no, technology use is something bad. And here we really have to think about what went wrong. I think part of what went wrong was an infighting within agriculture
Mhm.
of some people saying, if it's not natural, then it's bad.
Absolutely.
I grow my food without hormone use, without antibiotics use, without cruelty, and so on. I mean,
They'll throw
Are they
any
insane?
label on it.
but this is terrible. I mean, that insinuates that your neighbor is cruel to the
Right,
animals,
right.
or is polluting to the environment.
Or
and
there are
so on.
even hormones that you can give pigs because you can't give hormones
Exactly.
to any pigs.
Exactly.
But this farmer over here puts no hormones on, his meat. Well, that must mean this meat over here has hormones in
Right,
it.
exactly.
When there's not any.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and the same is true
It's-
for dairy. And
Yes,
all the
for
other
dairy,
hormones.
antibiotic free.
Right.
It's all antibiotic free.
Yeah. So we have our work cut out for us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I want agriculture to be proactive and informative. They need to stop being secretive and private and not talking, because not talking and being secretive looks as if you have something to hide.
Absolutely.
And unless you want to come across as such, which I don't think anybody does,
No.
we have to change.
Yeah.
We have to open up.
Yeah. And you've done an excellent job, Dr. Mitloehner. I just want to thank you for taking your career to the next level and leveling up and really getting into greenhouse gas emissions and studying that. It's been helpful for all of us. And I appreciate you taking it on a global level and trying to change things in a way that is very receivable and just compassionate, really. I mean, I appreciate you so much from that. From both Marlo and I, we just we want to really thank you for all you've done, and thank you for coming to North Carolina.
Yeah.
I love being here.
Yeah,
and exploring
Yeah.
our options to have it.
yeah, it's been awesome
Yeah.
having you on the podcast. But we usually end our podcast with a North Carolina farm fact, but we're going to switch it up today. And I know you got a lot of statistical knowledge in your head.
No pressure.
No pressure or anything, but we would love to hear maybe what is the one agricultural statistic that is the most impactful when you share with folks.
Well, that's probably one that I took out of the last agricultural census of the United States. It made me pause. That statistics, USDA statistics, says that we have 2 million farmers in the United States. with a population of 330 million, that sounds like a reasonable number. But of those 2 million farmers we have in this country, 1.5 million, so the majority, have an annual revenue of less than $25,000.
Wow, backyard.
So meaning they cannot sustain a family from that income. And that means some people would call them hobby farmers or backyard farmers or so. They're 1.5 of 2
That's
million.
3/4.
Okay?
Yeah.
Wow.
3/4 of all farmers really do it kind of on the side. Okay? And then I learned from that same report that it is 80,000 farmers in this country that produce 2/3 of all the food we all consume. I repeat that. 80,000 farmers produce 2/3 of all the food we consume in this country. What is the average age of those 80,000 farmers? 60. They are this close to retirement age. And now I ask you this. Will these 80,000 farmers recommend, in the majority, to their kids to stay on course and stay in farming, given all those stresses and all these pressures that the society is placing upon them? The answer I give myself when thinking of this is a good chunk of them will not. They will tell their kids to do something else. And that is a real problem to us as a society, because we must have a safe and nutritious and environmentally benign food supply in this country. It is of strategic importance, just like it is to have a good health supply system. We must have a continuing food supply that's resting on a few shoulders. And these people, they demand and they deserve our support.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I got 2 kids. My little boy is he's a potential farmer, future farmer. So I'm encouraging that, but I want him to do what makes him happy. So,
For sure.
yeah,
For sure.
yeah,
And I'm a positive thinker overall.
yeah.
But I also see what's flung against agriculture, okay?
Oh yeah,
And so agriculture needs to wake up to this. It's not all hunky-dory. It's not all great.
that's right.
And what I mean by not all great, what I mean by that is they have to be ahead of the discussion around the food that they produce. They need to be proud, just like the automobile industry and others are proud of what they produce. They need to be proud of what they produce and how they do it. And they need to be the experts that are out there, and not some activists that want them out.
Yeah,
I think that's the whole mission behind you and this podcast.
that was an incredible farm fact. That was amazing.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate you coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Frank Mitloehner.
You're very welcome.
Yep.
Thank you for having me.
Pleasure
I'm
to
signing
have
up
you.
for that class now.
Yeah.
All right, good.
And thanks everybody for joining us today. You can find us on @Banking Buddies Podcast, Apple, Spotify. We've got a YouTube channel, on Instagram. Just want to thank Dr. Mitloehner once again, and thank you guys for listening. Have a great day.
Thanks, guys.
Everything's on the table.
Bye.